You remember. You're remembering these scenes of us having met at a distance that correlates in the text to closeness. You wrote to me, "The story is already told. I am telling again. I am telling you the story is already there." You wrote to me, "Come down from the tower. Make sure to come down from the tower." As if I was the one above and you below, in the position to, with the history to, make my way down towards you, towards the ground, descending. I did something that you did not expect. I left the place that you wrote for me. When you arrived, you felt lost, disappointed, like I had led you astray. Even the possibility of my absence meant my unfaithfulness to you and the story. Yet you could not see the more likely twist, that what you wrote was a result of self-reference, a reflexive, notes for a larger production. You wrote to me, "You must believe, as I do, that we were written for each other." But you wouldn't believe that you were a writer, not a character. It was easier for you to write to me as if it were not an action, but an advance, a submission to a story that you claimed was never yours. You wrote to me, "I remember you in the way that time switches in a dream." I remember, as if already past, the scenes we must avoid, which would place us into different stories in different books. I imagine your dreaming of this tower like it could be seen, but finding it your inverse, you mistook the outside for the in. Your idea of the tower was deceptively fixed. Surface flaws, little cities, pebbles, scraps, and crumbs, all stood to affect the pitch at which your letters traveled. You wondered, in writing, if I could hear you through the page, as if we could move across a dimension of two. But I never heard you, never wrote to you, only about you, in this voice you hear now. You wrote with an auctionable eye, which perhaps suggested you were the hero of this story. If it did not belong to you, you wrote, at least you would, in a sense, come to own it. I say that the story is mine. You receive these drawings instead of letters. Pictures turn words into surfaces, and distances repeat themselves, as indicated by your persistence and restless signs. You imagined looks, both upwards and downwards. You confused backwards and forwards, and sought a future that passed only in sight. Full of references, your letters mixed up origins, creating imagined towers that reached into a sky that was only upwards. These moves, from down to up, forwards to backwards, made the reading seem like a movie, with distorted cuts to indicate shifts in time. The letters you wrote admitted to a visual sense, but I would not consent to more than the experience at the surface. You wrote to me, "I dream of you in visions, with white as black and black as white. For you, dreaming was seeing, and seeing seduced you to send letters across a fictional distance. You believed that your pages were fixed in space, and therefore could move and be moved. What you neglected was the point at an edge without color or shape, and thusly the edges of letters, lines, both there and not. The lines from which pans and dissolves became constituted. You hesitated to write outwards from a lateral hole, or to cast your words across a flattened graph. Who wrote for who, you, or the idea of the letter reaching someplace new, elsewhere? You wondered if ideas wrote, but forgot the question of the color of the edge. To analyze the shapes that broke down letters into parts, to knock askew a focus on certain scales of the design. You hurried to send letters so that some words could only be read from the marks left on the inside of the envelope. What you didn't recognize was an ability to unfold one's seam interminably, the existence of drawn stories, listless, permanent shifts to gray. You grew frustrated with repeated attempts to shine light onto abstract grids of rays. Your drawing was limited by an inability to write without looking. You wrote to me repeatedly in short bursts of the same scenes. You say you dreamt often of shapes of doors that were also doors, colors from which other colors had withdrawn, blacks that were whites, which made clear other blacks, anxious overexposures which revealed grains that you swore couldn't exist. My drawings, even then, invaded your speech, yet you could not admit that uncertainty would be the thing to make the whole story unravel. Our plot of missing. The film, for you, ends when closeness was to become critical and reveal the fundamental difference between us. When I drew you, I imagined a half-turn that revealed both the front and back of your head. In this way, I could show you that the future is simply a past that sees without seeing. To do this, I had to make do with sketches which became transparent over time. What your letters foregrounded was the eminence of light as a way of seeing through the blotches and grids. I did you the service of an expedited sound and imagined an audience that would take your failure as a way to understand. The film ends with a familiar slow-motion tilt that reveals to all viewers the inadequacy of light as a way of seeing past a dimension of two.